at me and tell me what you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel. Look at me and tell me what you see. I look at you and tell you what I feel.
Welcome back. Green Lantern. You'd think I'd be annoyed, maybe depressed that I'm having to watch this film, but no. I've been waiting a long time to get my teeth into this goddamn film. But I harbour no ill will. It's not like I have any kind of interest in the Green Lantern franchise. I'm just going to leave these here. So let's take a look at Green Lantern. The film begins with some opening narration because of course it fucking does. Why explain your universe organically through the film when you can just vomit it all into the audience's lap so you can rush the fuck out of everything? Yeah, that sounds like DC to me. Quick, tell people what it's about so we can get them to watch. No. Leave the story. Leave the characters. Just get the movie over with so we can make money. And for God's sake, merchandise the crap out of everything in sight. And the film again straight up tells us about Parallax, the entity of fear, and the enemy of the Green Lanterns, who are powered by will. And also about Arbin Saw, the Green Lantern who imprisoned Parallax. After the narration, we open on the planet Riot, and 3 aliens have crash-landed on the planet. They send out their distress call, and because they're very smart aliens, they walk away from the crash site, and the best thing to let other people know where they are. But their survival is irrelevant as they fall through the terrain into a cavern below, which they survive without any injury whatsoever. Luckily for them, their spacesuit armour things protect against stupidity. However, turns out the cavern is Parallax's prison as he awakens levitating the aliens. He kills them by eating their souls, and then breaks out of there in all his stupid-looking big-headed cloud glory. So that was Parallax, was it? This is what Parallax looks like in the comics. Yeah, quite the difference, ain't it? As well as appearance, it's also important to know the difference between the movie and the comic book. In the comic, Parallax isn't just an entity. He's the god, essentially, of fear, which means you can't really kill him. So instantly, the film has made one of the most dangerous Green Lantern villains, so dangerous he destroyed the Green Lantern Corps, seriously, and made him into a standard bad guy, regardless of how dangerous they make him sound throughout the film. The film then skips ahead for an arbitrary amount of time, 6 months later, and the Green Lantern Arbin Saw is travelling through Earth's sector. And I should say that this film is largely based on the Secret Origins story. However, the film takes that story and strips out anything meaningful and replaces it with things just meant to establish a franchise rather than make a good movie. For example, Arbin Saw is supposed to be transporting Atrocitus, the leader of the Red Lanterns, which would set them up for later movies. But no, we need Parallax immediately. Basically, what I'm saying is, all they had to do was recreate Secret Origins the book in movie form. That's it. A few tweaks here and there, but the translation would work because Secret Origins isn't just an origin story. It was a reboot for the Green Lantern mythos, so it was aptly suited. But no, they just couldn't leave it alone. Anyway, enough of my ranting. Arbin Saw is told by the mustachioed, red-skinned, pointed-eared Sinestro, who's definitely not evil at all, that Parallax has destroyed a planet. And wouldn't you know it, just as soon as the call is over, Parallax attacks the ship. Commence the incomprehensible light and explosion show! Why did Parallax attack exactly? He can destroy entire planets. Why would he give a fuck about one Green Lantern? Yes, Arbin Saw imprisoned him, but still, you'd think he'd have bigger fish to fry. Arbin Saw escapes the ship, but is mortally wounded and plots a course for the nearest inhabited planet, which happens to be Earth. Then we're introduced to our soon-to-be Green Lantern, Hal Jordan, party liaison. He wakes up after having sex with a random woman. It's marketed for kids after all, but he is courteous to her.
Sorry, I gotta run. Make yourself at home, okay? There's, water in the tap.
Ah, Hal. You're a dick. He drives off in his super cool muscle car, driving it like an idiot while wrapping a gift. It's nice to see our hero's first actions are jilting a lover and needlessly endangering lives. We move to the Air Force base as Hal hurriedly gets changed. He's taking part in a training dogfight with his wingwoman Carol, who shows up to tell him he's no match for the drones they're going up against, and that he's a dick.
Let me give you a little heads up. I've gone up against these sabers all week, and they have smoked me every time. There isn't anything you can do that they can't do better, faster, and without disappointing women everywhere.
Well, it's nice to know I'm not the only one to think he's a dick. But anyway, onto the flying of jets, with Hal and Carol against a new military drone that's being tested.
Sapphire. Cleared weapons hot at the merge.
Ferris test Sapphire. Weapons are hot.
Carol's codename is Sapphire because in the comics she becomes a Star Sapphire. Thanks for that. That sort of reference makes complete sense and isn't forced to introduce ludicrous fan service. They fly the jets as they have trouble beating the drones, and Hal has an idea.
Now stay right there and look real pretty.
Wow, a sexist dick too. And to really twist the knife in, Hal uses Carol as a decoy, sacrificing her to the drones so that he can get the upper hand. Okay, that's low. Also, comic book Hal Jordan wouldn't fucking do that. Yes, it's not real, but that's not the point. Plus, the drones are there because they say human pilots are reckless and make mistakes. So well done, Hal, for proving their fucking point. Hal manoeuvres himself and the drones into stalling, because he can barely recover from it, but the drones can't, further making the test a complete farce. However, whilst trying to recover from the stall, Hal starts panicking because this film's now Top Gun, as he has flashbacks to his father's death while on a test mission, further making his sacrifice of Carol nonsensical and disconnected from his actual character. Hal is told everything he did wrong while he tries to be the smart-ass Ryan Reynolds he is, which just comes off as a guy with a massive ego, so everyone Ryan Reynolds plays. I'm looking at you, Wade. Everyone clears out except for Hal and Carol, with Carol continuing to tell him off, with her getting so close to him that you can practically hear the walls of the room shout, "Get a room!" We then move to Arbinsor's crash site as he sends out a ball of light to find his replacement. And I never thought in a Green Lantern film I'd be praying for it not to be Hal Jordan. Moving on to more mundanity, Hal goes to visit his family for a birthday, and he's once again told what a self-centered douchebag he is. Now I know all this setup is for when he gets his powers and has to learn humility and that bullshit, but the first quarter of an hour of this film has been nothing but Hal either being a dick or being told he's a dick. It doesn't instill much empathy with the audience. He goes to the birthday boy's room to give him his gift, and the kid tells him how freaked out he got by Hal almost dying, so he can add upsetting children to the list of his faults. Also, say goodbye to the family, as they never appear again. Who needs family, yeah? And as Hal goes to his car, the plot shows up to whisk him away to where Arbinsor crashed. He runs to the ship and gets Arbinsor to safety, and much to my annoyance, he gives Hal his Green Lantern ring, telling him to use the lantern that's still in the ship. Hal gets his tech geek buddy to pick him up, to which he's surprised to say the least at the spaceship and the alien. Hal also tells him about the ring.
Give me this. You proposed?
Ha! I'll give you that one. That was pretty funny. They run from the military, who are as quick as bunnies to cover up the alien crash. You know, like they always bloody do. While driving away, they look at the lantern, and when Hal brings the ring near it, it goes crazy, nearly throwing them off the road. There's also another joke that might be a little closer to the bone than the filmmakers intended.
He said that the ring chose me. He said it was a great honor. Responsibility. Responsibility? Yeah. You? Maybe on their planet, responsibility just means asshole.
Yeah, that's pretty much what I've been saying this whole time. Meanwhile, on Oa, the Green Lantern homeworld, Sinestro is speaking with the Guardians of the Universe, and yeah, notice the broken chair? That's your setup for something really fucking stupid later on. Sinestro tells them about Arbinsor's death and Parallax, but the Guardians remain secretive and won't let Sinestro fight Parallax with the rest of the Green Lanterns, because they don't see the irony of being afraid of the Fear Demon. Next up, we meet Hector Hammond, our secondary antagonist for the film. Now in the comics, he's a successful private military consultant, and he looks like this. What is he in this film? Of course, he's your stereotypical computer chess playing nerd who's eating sauerkraut from the jar just to gross out the kiddies in the audience. Thanks for the effort.
Dr. Hammond? Dr. Hector Hammond? We need to ask you to come with us.
Hector is taken blindfolded to a secret underground base. He meets Amanda Waller, who's vastly more important than this film gives her credit for, and Hector is taken to see Arbin Soor's body, which he has been selected to do the autopsy on, which I'm sure will go perfectly well without any problems whatsoever. Back with Hal and the lantern in his apartment. Where his friend went, who cares? As he puts on the ring and tries to use the lantern, at the same time, Hector begins his autopsy, setting up the parallel with them both getting power of opposing alignments at the same time. Out of frustration of not getting it to work, Hal touches the ring to the lantern, activating it as it takes control of him.
Brightest day, and blackest night. No evil shall escape my sight. Let those who worship evil's might beware my power. Green Lantern's light.
I would say something like how convenient that something happens to Hal and Hector at the exact same time, but that sort of crap happens all the time in comics. After recovering, Hal gets a knock at his door. It's Carol, to which he needlessly acts very abruptly to, because she wouldn't know what the lantern is and has no connection to it anyway. Hammond has finished his autopsy and hands his results to Amanda as she takes his research and makes sure he'll keep his mouth shut. But on to more boring stuff as Hal and Carol go to a bar and talk. Some more flirting happens, then they end up dancing together. Well, isn't this some riveting stuff right here? We get it, she's the love interest. Let's move on to something hopefully more interesting. Hal leaves the bar in a huff after being told he panicked in the jet, and while walking to his car he's jumped by 3 guys, who proceed to beat the crap out of him. They're also the 3 guys who worked at the airbase but lost their jobs because of what Hal did. So you can see where they're coming from. You know, it's almost a cliche that when a superhero is born, the first thing that superhero does is stop a mugging or something. But no, here he has to save his own ass. Can't say I'm surprised. As Hal is beaten to the ground, to show the kind of superhero he is, he not only makes them stop from walking away, he also grabs a handful of nails and attempts to throw them at the group. But instead, the ring punches the crap out of them, one through a brick wall, so he's very much dead. Did that seem like heroic behaviour to you? Because it really didn't to me. Wasn't there a better way of showing that he's got his powers other than that? Yes, they were beating him up. They were also walking away. And did I mention the death? But quick, no time for consequences, as Hal is once again whisked away by a ball of light, this time into space, and to hammer home the parallel again, we see Hector having night terrors. I think Hal got the better deal, as Hector wakes up to see he's got glowing yellow eyes. At the same time, Hal has reached Oa, otherwise known as the Nothing But CGI planet. And as Hal has been abducted by an alien, it only makes sense to start with the anal probe. No, I'm only joking. Hal gets checked out medically as he is then given his Green Lantern suit. Now, a lot of people complained about the CGI suit and how bad it looked. I'm not one of those people, because what else were they gonna do? Use a bright green leotard? So I don't mind the suit. I consider it acceptable. The fact that Ryan Reynolds' head appears to be floating doesn't help my case, though. It's not good, but it could have been worse. I'm more confused at why they chose to give Hal Jordan demonic-looking white eyes. The eyes are the windows to the soul, filmmakers. If you fuck with them, you creep people out. Then, while acting like an idiot, Hal gets to meet Tomar Ray, who'll serve as his mentor and teacher, as he tells him about the ring's function, like translation of languages and all the knowledge of the Green Lanterns.
I am Tomar Ray, protector of Sector 2813 and home to
80,012 galaxies, 2.34 million sentient species. How do I know that?
the induction process. It activates the ring's higher functions, including a working knowledge base. As you are the first to be chosen, I have been sent to welcome you here.
And here is?
Yeah, him getting all the knowledge possible kind of negates why the hell he'd be asking those kinds of questions. He needs to ask those questions so we find out, so he can be the audience proxy. But now it doesn't really make sense. They start flying through all the CGI the animator can muster. Let's hope they don't end up like the guy from the Holy Grail.
When suddenly, the animator suffered a fatal heart attack.
Upon reaching the central power battery that powers everything, Hal gets to see all the fan service characters shoved in the film for no real reason. With all the lanterns gathered together, Sinestro makes his big speech, asking for them to fight by his side as he rallies them all into declaring their allegiance to the Corps.
It was for this moment that we were created. But I don't need to tell you your duty. I don't need to tell you who we are.
And despite it being one man who's good at making speeches, getting an entire army to fight for him who show their allegiance with one arm raised while chanting something, please try to ignore the dictator behind the curtain. Hal begins his instruction from Tomar Ray as he shows him a Mobius strip construct. Can you tell this was meant to be in 3D? It's seamless, really. Hal tries to form something which is pretty impotent, but then Kilowog introduces himself.
The ring will inform you where there is an imminent threat. This particular threat's name is Kilowog. He'll be your combat training officer.
Never let your guard down, Poozer.
Training begins with Kilowog throwing stuff at Hal. But enough about that. He also creates a sun, to which Hal nearly gets engulfed by. And then he just straight up punches him in the face, to which Hal manages to drag Kilowog to the ground. And that's all for training, apparently. According to this, if you can beat Kilowog in a fight, you're good to go as a Green Lantern, no problem. They could have put in a training montage at least, for God's sake. But now Sinestro turns out to add his 2 cents into Hal's training by saying he isn't good enough to own Arbin Sword's ring. And then they begin to fight with swords, no less. Not the most exciting fight when they could create anything they can think of. But the fight does get more varied and interesting as Sinestro constantly talks about fear and how it must be overcome until he just beats Hal to the ground and Sinestro flies off after another insult. You know, in the comics there wasn't so much outright hatred from Sinestro towards Hal. There was a sense that he didn't like the ring's choice, but he respected it and he gave Hal the necessary instruction which led to them becoming friends. But once again, the cracked whip of DC appears to say, "No subtlety, no pacing with characters. Sinestro's going to be evil. We can't have him being anything more than an arsehole for most of the film. We have sequels and a franchise to think about, don't you know?" Then Hal says he quits, just like that. Not exactly the paragon of willpower, is he? Tomar Ray tries to convince him not to quit, but no. He flies back home and gives up. Another great example of heroism, filmmakers. And at the same time, a small amount of Green Lanterns fly off to face Parallax, which I'm sure will result in his defeat, ending the movie before it embarrasses itself further. Perhaps my own willpower can hopefully make this film somewhat better, even if that means just stopping. The next day, Hammond is teaching class, and he starts acting strange.
Some people call them extremophiles because they live in the most extreme environments on Earth, such as the boiling waters of a geyser. Michael! What did you say?
I didn't say anything.
And he just telekinetically throws the kid out of his chair. Did you notice something missing there? Yeah, it's a scene that shows that he's disrespected by his students and is insecure about that, to set up the moment we just watched. But no, that's right, he's a nerd, so obviously he'd be insecure and would just lash out like that. The filmmakers just cut out the middleman. Isn't that nice? However, Hammond acts a little smarter and actually tests his blood to see what's wrong with him, as he sees something changing his red blood cells. But never mind about mutations, his father wants to speak with him. Hector and his father meet in his office to talk, and he tells Hector that he was the one that got him the job doing the autopsy, and Hector hears more thoughts.
He'll never get it. Just wasting his life away.
Causing him to leave. Meanwhile, the Lanterns have found Parallax and start to try and subdue him, but he just shrugs them off and kills the majority of them. Sinestro relays to the Guardians what he saw and that Parallax is headed for them, to which Sinestro demands to know where Parallax came from. Yes, please tell us, O wise Guardians of the Universe. Tell us where Parallax came from.
Will has always been our sole weapon against the forces of darkness in the universe. But as that power began to seem insufficient, a great debate arose among us. Should we exploit another source of power? One we had long since sworn should never be used. Fear.
Really? So the Guardians created the yellow power battery to, as they said, exploit its power. So it's not the fact that every part of the emotional spectrum just needs to exist. No, that's too simple. or the fact that Parallax is just the embodiment of fear. Again, too simple. Let's make it really fucking complicated.
Alone, this Guardian entered the Forbidden Chamber. He wanted to prove the light of fear could be mastered. His intentions were pure, but his hopes were naive.
So a Guardian became Parallax. So a being whose entire existence revolves around willpower gave in to the acquisition of power. Also, this film states that the Guardians created the green power ring and then created the only thing that can truly stop it for no reason then other than just in case. As opposed to the yellow power battery being the literal polar opposite originating in a parallel dimension. But you know why I think it is? It's the grittiness angle. You can't have an organisation that's just wholly good. There has to be darkness, there has to be secrets there. Despite the fact they already had that with Sinestro. So now the Guardians have only themselves to blame, making them very stupid. But then Sinestro just tells them that a yellow power ring should be made just to speed up his character arc, because remember, they've got a franchise to think about. It's time for a party for the unveiling of the new drone fighter jets. Hal and Hector greet each other. They've known each other for years, but that hasn't been worth mentioning apparently. Hal sees Carol and more flirting ensues, with Hal complimenting her dress, which we don't see because the camera seems to like to film her in a way that makes her look naked. And after some speeches, Hector speaks with Carol intending to do his own flirting, but instead lets slip his little secret.
I know it couldn't have been easy growing up with your dad, but hey, you're doing great, so...
I'm doing great. He's right, though, I'm not a doer. Although I did get to examine an alien body recently. That was very cool.
If let slip meant blurt out at the speed of verbal diarrhea. If only this guy was in charge of all the government conspiracies. We'd have found out about the fake alien autopsy that landed on the moon who shot JFK by now. But Hector's father intervenes, causing him to walk away angrily. As the helicopter is leaving with Hector's father, he uses his ability to cause a drinks tap to fly into the helicopter's rotor, causing it to spiral out of control. But have no fear, Hal appears as good old Green Lantern to save the day, creating a car track to bring the helicopter to a full stop. And I've only got one thing to say. Where the fuck have you been? We're an hour into this film and that's the first bit of heroics you've done. And no, I'm not counting you saving your own ass. Again, death. And Hal frees Carol from some rubble, making sure that he's seen by everyone in the crowd, and then flies off silently, which is quite a shift in his character. You'd think he'd stick around for the attention. Meanwhile, Hector gets home and he basically gains a giant bloated head. And he even gets the attention of the other bloated head thing in the universe, as Parallax makes his way to Earth. The next morning, Hal's friend wakes him up because he's figured out it was him, and he wants to see it in person. However, when Hal tries, it doesn't work, but he just recharges it from the lantern and then the ring is activated. What was the point of showing us it needed to be recharged exactly? Couldn't that have been shown to us without stopping the movie for a second to make sure we get it? And Hal's friends suggest that he's a superhero and they always get the girl. But let's not forget, Hal still quit like a pussy, so no hero here. At Carol's office, the film is now in the evening because it can't make up its mind what time of day it wants, as Hal shows up to do exactly what he's been doing this entire time, flirting with Carol, except now he can do it with a creepy low voice.
Evening, ma'am. Didn't get a chance to say goodbye.
And equally creepy white eyes.
Hal?
Miss?
Hal? Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god, Hal!
How did you know it was me?
What do you mean? I've known you my whole life. I've seen you naked. You don't think I would recognize you because I can't see your cheekbones?
Wow, they're really going to make fun of the ineffectiveness of his disguise. This coming from DC, who gave us the idea of Clark Kent's glasses? You shouldn't throw stones in your glass house, DC. Anyway, Carol freaks out a bit, but Hal explains it all to her and gives her a green necklace as a late birthday gift, which will disappear as soon as he's not paying attention to it, so great gift, Hal. As Hal flies off though, we see bloated Hector is there watching from his car as he goes to his lab to continue to see what's happening to him. The screen shows he's mutating faster, but really you don't need a microscope to see that. And Amanda Waller comes in to speak with Hector, touching him, which allows him to see her memories of her family's murder, which again is just fan service and not important at all. They take Hector back to the autopsy lab and he sees his father, grabbing him, and he's subsequently sedated. And after the sedation wears off, Hector is locked to a table ready to have some tests done, and as Amanda calls to have Hector sedated again, he stabs the scientist in the eye with his own needle, and starts rampaging, throwing everybody around, placing his father on the table. But once again, Hal shows up to save the day, bursting through the wall. The fight basically amounts to Hector does something and Hal counters it. And they both end up on the ground as Hector reads Hal's mind, finding out who he is, and also all about his conversation with Carol. Hector, feeling quite powerful now, floats his father to the observation room and then burns him alive. But that's exactly what you expect from a movie marketed to children. Frankly, I expect at least one execution before I consider a movie kid-friendly. Also, another fine example of heroics from Hal. And Hal hits Hector with a ring blast, which serves to tell Parallax that Arbinsur's ring is active, so now he's doubly gonna destroy Earth. After the complete balls up of a rescue, Hal is once again ready to give up, as he says he's too afraid to be a Green Lantern, but Carol tells him he has the ability to overcome fear. Right, in the comics, when Hal Jordan became Green Lantern, it was a case of needing to be fearless. However, when the Green Lantern moniker went to Kyle Rayner, he realised that it wasn't fearless. It was the ability to overcome fear that was the point. Do you see what I mean about them rushing through the story? The fact that they are willing to throw the development of other characters under the bus just to get through this. And back on Oa, they have created the Yellow Power Ring, with Sinestro willing to train all the Lanterns in using it. Which isn't incredibly dumb at all. Why would a weapon made of fear that uses fear defeat a creature that feeds off fear? That doesn't make sense. But regardless, Hal appears to make a grand speech about overcoming fear and how they can't use the weapon. But they just flat out tell him no, and he goes off to fight Parallax on his own. I'm glad these guys are defending the universe. So now it's time for the final confrontation as Hal goes to the Air Force base. He finds Carol floating in midair, held hostage by a now wheelchair-bound Hector. Hector threatens to stab Carol with a Parallax syringe, so in trying to convince him to stop, Hal chooses to remove his ring, becoming completely powerless, and even offers the ring to Hector to make him stop. So Hector gets lantern powers, but of course it's not that simple as Hal tells him.
I lied. I lied too. You see, the way it works is, you have to be chosen.
That, and the fact that at this point the ring is incapable of killing, so he wasn't much of a threat to begin with. And then Parallax shows up out of the blue without much fanfare, and he just picks up Hector, killing him. It's nice to know that it's not just superheroes that get disrespected. Long-running villains of the series get to be tossed to the side and forgotten as well. Hal tries to run for the ring but is caught by Parallax, and as he starts absorbing Hal, Carol activates one of the jets and fires missiles at Parallax's big old head, allowing Hal to get to the ring and fly out of there. Parallax begins his attack, starting with the city as Carol and Hal watch.
The ring chose me for a reason.
Yes, we get it. You've said it like 10 times already. Stop trying to make yourself feel better and do some goddamn heroics for once. And Parallax engulfs the streets as we see him kill possibly hundreds of people until Hal shows up to fight him. He throws a few things at Parallax and he holds him with a shield, all the while Parallax is taunting him, trying to make him afraid. Which isn't really Parallax's style. Why would he bother talking with him to make him afraid when he can just go into his mind and do it? Or create constructs that instill fear, like his father's death, for example. Also, in the comics, when Hal first encountered Parallax, he didn't win. Also, he was Parallax. That's how much Parallax won. And why this isn't Parallax. Hal forces his way through fake Parallax's non-body as we see he's literally made up of the bodies of the dead. So that's nice. Hal escapes into space, forcing Parallax to follow him and away from Earth. Hal sees the sun intending to burn Parallax up as he gets him into orbit, then he literally punches him into the sun. Which is a reference to how Parallax died in the sun, except in the comics, Hal Jordan sacrificed himself and threw himself into the sun to stop him. So the reference is more of an insult than anything. The other Green Lanterns save Hal from falling into the sun to show that they're not all selfish arseholes out for their own survival first. Back on Oa, Hal is celebrated for the defeat of Parallax, and even Sinestro gives him his respect. Then we're back on Earth because this film doesn't know when to finish, as we get more goddamn flirting with Carol as they finally kiss. Wait, she was supposed to be his love interest? No, you're joking. And then after the Uber 3D credits, we get this post-credit sequence, because if Marvel can do it, then you can bet your ass DC will do it too. Nothing like a rush to the finish line, is there? That bit with Sinestro was not needed at all. It could have been done better if Sinestro was the wise mentor who becomes a friend to Hal, and then in a sequel, God forbid, Hal would see that he may be great at being a Green Lantern, but he's also ruling his sector like a dictator with a giant green iron fist. You know, like in the comics. So that was Green Lantern. I read that the filmmakers originally got the Green Lantern oath wrong and had to be corrected by Ryan Reynolds. And you know what? I believe it. Everything is wrong with this, and it all comes down to trying to establish a lucrative franchise rather than just making a movie. I didn't even mind Ryan Reynolds as Hal Jordan. His character and dialogue was written terribly, but Reynolds as Hal Jordan isn't a bad idea. But I don't understand how you can make a movie based on a comic and then go out of your way to ignore its canon on every fundamental level. It makes no sense. There's only one thing I liked about this film in the end. And it's this. That's it. I quite like the design of the Green Lantern ring. Thanks, DC. Job well done. See you next time.